Just a moment of prayer. God, give us a clear vision of the truth, faith in your power, and confident assurance of your love. Amen. Thank you for inviting me to come and do this service. I come realizing that you have already an impressive roster of starters, people like Drew, Andrew, and Jeannie Kay, and Marg Leonard, and of course the one you share with the United Church, Marlene Phillips. Perhaps there are others, very capable people who are able to do services here. So it reminds me of the farmer who had a donkey, and he entered his donkey in the Kentucky Derby. And all his friends said, "Why, that poor animal will be a laughing stock throughout the county. Why would you ever enter your donkey in the Kentucky Derby?" And he said, "Well, think of the company he'll keep." So you're supposed to laugh there. It's all right. So anyway, I feel I'm in good company here, in your company and in the company of some good preachers that are part of this congregation. Now, to get to the point, if I were to give you a pencil and paper and say, "Draw for me a picture of God," what would you do? I would be hard-pressed if that request was made of me. But when I was 6 or 7, I likely wouldn't have had any problem at that time. I would have drawn a picture, likely a picture of a man, because we were always taught that God was a man, an old man, no doubt with a beard, maybe, a long white robe, likely, very wise-looking, stern, compassionate. But in the intervening years, we've realized that God is not a man or a woman. God transcends gender, but stern, oh yes, compassionate, most certainly, loving, sad, no doubt, and a dozen other descriptions. But all those are descriptions about God and are not pictures of God. And since I've done some thinking since I was 6, I would move to more things about God, where God has been in the history of the world. Floods and fires would give me trouble, but they are caused to some extent by our abuse of the nature God has given us. Earthquakes, well, that's a hard one to explain. Who can you blame for an earthquake? Where has God been in the lives around us? Now, there is evidence of how God works, evidence to some extent, but then I come to another hard problem, the problem of the Holocaust. That's where my carefully scripted reasoning breaks down. I say Holocaust above all that has happened in the previous years, because that happened in my lifetime. 6 million people put to death, people who believed in God. Perhaps the best answer is one that I have heard. Where was God when that happened? Where was God when so many of the bad things happened to good people? And all we can say is God is right where he was on the first Good Friday, weeping and suffering the pain along with everyone else. And so today is with us and weeping and suffering the pain that is inflicted upon people. You see, the God problem is almost too much for us to fathom. Little wonder that Mark Twain would dismiss the whole question when asked if he believed in God, and he replied, "Well, none that I've met so far." God is certainly hard to pin down, except to say that we live in an accident-prone universe in which we are given free will to use it as we please and suffer the consequences. So I'm left with what I have called in the sermon title, Glimpses of God. At least we have glimpses of God. If God is inscrutable, at least we have these fleeting glimpses, just enough to lead us to believe that there is something to cling to. In my own experience, there have been glimpses of God. Let's say a soldier in the field, injured and suffering thirst, and the padre appears and gives the soldier a cool drink from his flask. Just a simple gesture of comfort. But in that fleeting instance, there is God. Or standing outside a hospital room where a patient is dying and the family is gathered around, and I'm supposed to go in and say the right things. At that moment, the words of a hymn come to mind. Master, the tempest is raging, the billows are rising high. That's me at that moment in the hospital room. Then comes the refrain, peace, be still. My soul is comforted. Be still, my soul, for God is on your side. And I proceed in that hospital room, realizing that I'm not alone. For those few seconds, there's a glimpse of God. Or I'm standing at the altar, saying to a couple, I now pronounce you husband and wife. And I think there is something really beyond me. Again, a glimpse of God. Or at the font, holding in my arms, looking into the innocent, trusting eyes of that baby, a glimpse of God. So the God who seems so remote in so many situations, yet there is a fleeting glimpse. Now, just a word, a personal word, about the day that is special, this day that is special. Mother's Day, goes back to the ancient Greeks and Romans when there was a festival for celebrating mothers. But in 1908, that would be about 110 years ago, Anna Jarvis in Grafton, West Virginia, in a church by the name of St. Andrew's, but sorry, it was St. Andrew's Methodist Church. But in that church, first had a ceremony honoring mothers. And then a few years later, Woodrow Wilson, who was president, 1914, proclaimed Mother's Day an official holiday. So we say Family Day, but certainly we don't forget Mother's Day. And if I asked you, I suppose each one of you would have some kind of a mother's story to tell. I think this day of my mother has been gone for 15 years, but you know, Mother is always with us in a mysterious sort of way. The things that Mother said, the things she stood for, the sacrifices she made for us. But I think of one instance that has come back to me. I was in my teens, I guess, and I was in love. Now, when you're in love in your teens, you just think that the rest of life that's the way you're going to feel. That wonderful feeling has come over you, and that's the way it's going to be for the rest of your life. That's what I thought. But then the girl changed her mind, and I was plunged into sadness and depression. I can chuckle about it now, but it wasn't funny then, because I thought that's the way I was going to be for the rest of my life, sad and depressed. Well, after about 3 days of this, moping around the house, my mother, who quite often was so soft-hearted, sympathetic, was there to hold my head when I was sick or to rub Vicks on my chest. Mother, who meant so much. Mother got stern for a change, and she said, "Don't be so damn foolish, go out and find another one." Well, I went out, I guess, and found another one eventually, and next month we celebrate our 56th wedding anniversary. So Mother was right, as she usually was. So Mother's Day, many memories. Happy Mother's Day. Amen.